Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. It's been a few weeks since the game came out and I'm sure many of you already or are about to start their second characters. I myself am about to start my second character as a necromancer in hardcore mode. I'm gonna be streaming that. I'm gonna leave the link on the description below, so if you wanna come by and say hello, you're more than welcome. In fact, I would love to see you there. Now, in today's video, I'm gonna be explaining some abilities and what I recommend you to do as you level up from level 1 to 100. And yeah, so let's get right into it. So let's get started with the abilities. So honestly, the rogue is a very strong class overall. It's just overall very strong. When it comes down to your core skills, there's not a single one of them that is not bad. Sorry, let me mute my phone. All of them are very good, but I will explain more in detail which ones I recommend. So let's start with the basic skills. Right now, at the moment, there seems to be a heavy meta on puncture because the rogue has a fantastic synergy and has really good skills and aspects that help you do vulnerability damage. So if I go over my stats and I look down here, my damage to vulnerable enemies, oops, I went a little bit too low. Vulnerable damage is 235% because most of my aspects do damage to vulnerable enemies, but this is something to keep in mind for late game. But with that, you know, with that being said, I'm sorry, I always say with that being said, I don't know why, but anyway, puncture gives you when you go to fundamental puncture, it gives you that effect to make enemies vulnerable, and for that reason it seems that people are inclining to take this as a basic ability. When it comes down to core skills, Twisting Blade is still the meta. Even after the multiple nerfs it's gotten, is still the strongest core ability. But none of the other core skills abilities are bad. All of them are fairly freaking good. Now, why is Twisting Blades better than the other ones? Is because the aspect that makes Twisting Blade strong, which is called Blade Dancer, you can get it very early into the game. I believe the dungeon that you can get this aspect is somewhere here or somewhere here. It's right after Fracture Peaks, so it's definitely something to keep in mind when you're leveling up and you want to have a smooth experience. Another very strong core ability, if you're gonna go for a range rogue, would be Penetrating Shot. But what makes Penetrating Shot very good is the aspect called Trick Shot. The problem is that Trick Shot, and it's an aspect I myself have only gotten from drops, but I know you can get it from dungeons, is that Trick Shot is in an area that is a little bit further mid-game, around 40-ish level, right? So if you want to find the aspect that you want, remember that you can just click, you know, left click on it, and it will tell you the dungeon that you need to do to unlock it. So here, Trick Shot aspect, I left click on it and we can see that it's all the way down here. So I mean, you probably before you even get there, you'll probably get a drop for this aspect, which again makes Penetrating Shot very good. But on the early levels, you know, between 1 to 30, what I highly recommend is to go for Poison Trap and any of the Imbuement. The Imbuement skills of the rogue are absolutely broken. They are all very good. So I'm gonna explain to you which ones are better and for what. So Shadow Imbuement is absolutely a beast on clearing dungeons. So if you want to clear dungeons very fast, use Shadow Imbuement. If you want a moderated speed but you want to decimate, completely melt the bosses, take Poison Imbuement. If you want a little bit of both, then take Cold Imbuement. Overall, the Imbuement skills on the rogue are an absolute must in the early stages because they are so overpowered. And that's due to the nature of the game. The early mobs don't have any elemental resistances, so you are just gonna decimate the enemy using any of the imbuement skills. Also Poison Trap on the you're level what, 10, 15, and you already have poison trap. A single poison trap is gonna completely destroy a pack of mobs, and you don't have to do anything about it. In fact, I have a very popular video on my short section where I am kiting the butcher just using poison traps to kill it. So rogue, with rogue, poison trap, and any of the imbuement skills, if you can focus on those two, you're gonna be just fine. Shroud is a great skill for when you're playing hardcore. It gives you very nice defenses. Concealment is also a nice alternative because it makes you unstoppable and it gives you stealth. And smoke grenade, I to tell you on it, to be honest, I never used it, so you don't really, I don't know, maybe you can do something with it. I wasn't able to come up with something nice. When it comes down to agility skills, if you're playing hardcore, shadow step is a must. There's just no way you cannot not take that. You have to take it. And dash, well, you can or you cannot, that's up to you. I like the mobility of dash, and having both shadow step and dash together makes you very, very agile. Now, caltrops is a decent skill. I wouldn't call it a must or anything like that. It's just a decent skill that you can do very nice synergies when you're playing marksman builds. Caltrops, it can definitely do some work. It has a couple of nice effects, like for example, deals cold damage and chills enemies for 20 seconds, and also gives you 5% in critical strike chance against enemies inside your caltrop. Doubles this amount against vulnerable enemies. Again, making emphasis on that vulnerable effect because there's so many aspects and so many abilities and skills here that does something against vulnerable enemies. It's super, super strong. And lastly, when it comes down to your ultimate skills, traps, the death trap is probably the one that you're gonna use the most. Rain of arrows is very, very situational, and you will probably never use it unless you get a sacred unique item that makes that ultimate ability very strong. But if you don't have that unique item, you'll probably never see, this ability will never see the light of day. And then Shadow Clone is also a very nice alternative for a few builds, but again, it's not really something that you're gonna see very often. Death Trap seems to be the meta nowadays. Moving down to the key passives. The key passives are very straightforward. Exposure is for a traps build. If you're gonna be using Death Trap and Poison Trap, then you take exposure. If you're gonna be using like if you wanna focus a lot on vulnerability damage, then you take Victimize, because Victimize with Shadow Imbuement makes them just a beautiful synergy with explosions everywhere. It's a fun, it's definitely a fun passive to take. Precision is when you go for marksman. Any marksman build that you want to take, definitely precision is the one that you want to go for. And close quarter combat, that's the one that I currently have, is for somebody who is more focused on that critical strike chance and critical damage. And well, my critical strike chance right now is at 40%, so I kind of did a mix of critical strike damage and critical strike chance with vulnerability damage. They just work with each other and makes me kill the enemy very, very fast. And lastly, you got Momentum, which is a fantastic key passive if you're a hardcore player, because it gives you that damage reduction, increased energy regeneration, and movement speed to get out of those very difficult situations. So overall, like I said, the rogue skill tree is very, very easy to comprehend. And to come up with very, very good builds. I have yet to find a build that doesn't work. It's very hard to go wrong with rogue, but even saying that, I've seen people go wrong with it because they always forget to focus on those stats. No matter what kind of build you make, if you don't have a proper synergy with your stats, it's just not gonna work, especially on late game. So once you finish leveling till level 40, 50 using imbuement skills and poison, that's when you need to start thinking about upgrading and making sure that your weapons have stats modifiers like 56% vulnerable damage, damage to close enemies, critical strike damage, or 40% core skill damage. These kind of things you need to start thinking on which one is the one that you want to focus on. as you can see here on the current build as an example, I have green gems on my weapons because my focus is on vulnerable enemies. So by having critical strike chance of 40% and then having my green gems, you can see that I increase critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies 12%, right? So I have a very nicely focused damage to vulnerable enemies. So you will notice that a lot of my aspects have something to do with vulnerable stuff, right? So dealing direct damage to enemies affected by my trap gives me a 52% chance to make them vulnerable. You know, killing a vulnerable enemy grants you 62% increased energy regeneration for 4 seconds. Making an enemy vulnerable has up to 50% chance to grant 3 increased critical strike chance, and blah 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 blah. And it's just the same everywhere else. So that's what I'm trying to say. Make sure that you have a clear idea of what you might want your build to be, because all your skills overall are very strong, but what really matters comes down to the stats that you choose to aim for. Now, going to the Paragon tree. The Paragon on the Rogue, I think, is very easy to understand. Let's go to the big mode here. You have very strong glyphs. You can come up with very fun ideas and very nice boards. So just to give you an example, I'm gonna go and explain my board here. I have, first of all, what I believe the most important glyph, which is exploit. Again, it's a very good glyph because it focuses on vulnerable effect. So it gives me 30% in chance, sorry, 30% increased vulnerable damage to enemies. And also, when an enemy is damaged by me, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. So you can already see how obsessed I am with vulnerable on this build, right? Also, never mind, but I'm gonna leave them on the description below, all the builds I have come up with, so you can check them out if you wish to do so. So the Paragon boards have very freaking good rare nodes. For example, this rare node that does fantastic synergy with the exploit glyph, that gives me 20% vulnerable damage, 25% damage to injured enemies, and the nodes around it just increases that exponentially. Then you have this legendary node that exploits weaknesses. Whenever you deal damage to vulnerable enemies, they take 1% increased damage from you for 6 seconds, up to 15%. So you can already kind of have an idea of how the Paragon board kind of works. You get a lot of very nice rare nodes, like for example this one, Hunter Killer, that increases 32% damage to elites, and blah blah blah. But anyway, let's go back into the glyph, right? Another glyph that is definitely very strong in the Rogue would be the combat glyph that increases my critical strikes, and also it gives me like skills that critically strike restores 12% on my energy cost. So they're definitely a very good option. Another a rare node that you can see is Artifice, that increases 20% vulnerable damage, and I need to even increase these two things right over here. But yeah, I mean, I think that the Rogue, I haven't really played the other classes as much, but I will say that the Rogue is a very straightforward class, easy to understand. It's a glass cannon. You know, you're gonna do a lot of damage, but you can die very easily. So be mindful of that, especially if you're playing hardcore. And yeah, man, I don't know what else to say. Oh yes, sorry, efficacy. Here's another very nice glyph that you can use to increase your imbuement skills, especially if you're focusing on poison or any of the imbuement abilities. Anyway, I think that I have given a nice little overview of how the Rogue class works. It's a very strong class, and it's a lot of fun to play. And I hope this little guide slash review helps you when you're on your journey to playing the Rogue. And I wish you the very best of luck on your new character or on your Rogue. And if you found this helpful, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, leave a comment, and if you have any questions or anything, I will try my best to answer them. Have a wonderful day, weekend, night, morning, and I'll see you on the stream or tomorrow or the next video. I will leave my stream link on the video on the description below as well. Take care and See ya.